So let's walk into a demo of how I would get data using Power BI Desktop. So I've opened up Power BI Desktop here and I'm going to hit the Get Data button. From here, I'm going to select More and Online Services. So this will show me online services that are available. I have Dynamics 365 Business Central, which is what I'm going to be selecting here, and I'm going to hit Connect. As soon as I do that, it's going to prompt me for my credentials to sign in. In this case, I've already supplied the credentials, but it would be my ID and password. And now it's showing me the tenant that's available to me and production in Sandbox if Sandbox is set up. In this case, I want to connect to Sandbox. So I'm going to expand Sandbox, and I have a list of companies that are available to me. So I'm going to select Cronus Canada. Now here's all the objects that have been made visible to me as a user. So a fairly large list here of different objects that are available. And I'm going to show you shortly how I would expose another web service endpoint to be able to connect to. So I'm not going to connect to any of the objects in this case, but if I wanted, a list of customers, I can definitely do that. I've created a customers webinar here. I have GL entries on job lists. So I'm just going to hit cancel to this, and I'm going to show you how you would expose another web endpoint. So I'm going to switch over to Business Central. From here, to create a new data endpoint or web services endpoint, I'm going to select Setup and Extensions. And I'm going to go to Assisted Setup. And I'm going to select the ability or option for reporting data. So I'm just going to select that. And I'm going to click Start Setup. And I'm just going to run this again. So that's okay. Hit Next. So I have the option to create a new data set at this point, or copy an existing data set, or edit an existing data set. So I'm going to create a new data set, hit Next, give it a name. So we're going to call this Customers and Items 2 for Webinar as an example. Now this could be a page or query. I'm going to select query here, and I'm going to hit the lookup. So these are all the objects that are exposed to me. So I have, all these available, these different queries that have already been created and exposed. If I scroll down the list, fairly large list of options here. So in this case, I want customers and items. So we're going to scroll up. So we can use the search at the top here. So we're going to select customers. So here's a list of all the customer objects that are available to me at the moment. So I'm going to select item sales by customer in this case. And we're going to hit OK. So this is object 102. And I'm going to hit Next. Now these are all the fields that are available to me. I can apply a filter. I'm just going to select all the fields in this particular case. Now we could add a filter. If I click Add Filters, I can, add all sorts of filters and create a very customized list. In this case, I'm not going to apply a filter. I'm going to hit Publish. And I'm going to hit Finish. So it's created a new endpoint. Now if I go back to Power BI and we select Get Data, and we select our online services and Business Central, and we hit Connect. So I'm going to select my Sandbox once again. I'm going to select Cronus. And now we can select Webinar. I put that in the name here. So I have customer and items 2 for Webinar. So if I select that as my list, I'll see that it's going to preview the list for me. Here's a list of all the items that were purchased. and I'm going to hit transform data. So it's now loading this into Power Query Editor for me to edit in my model. So the first thing I notice is that quantities are negative numbers. So I'm just going to change that quickly. I'm just going to transform that column, and we're going to change this to be multiply this by -1, just get a positive number, and hit OK to this. And the other thing I want to do is, I'll just leave that. We'll just close and apply for now. So it's applying the changes to my model, loading the model with the data into my Power BI desktop file. So now I could easily create something fairly simple. So let's assume that I want, let's choose the item number here. So we're going to go to item number, drag that onto the report. We're going to choose a matrix, and then I'm going to choose the quantity. We'll drag that into the values. So here's quantity. Now I could also do something like I want description into the rows, and let's format that so it's a little better. So if I go to row headers, I could choose row headers. So we'll expand that. So we're going to go to row headers. We're going to take off the stepped layout, so everything's in one row. Then I'm going to go to the subtotals, and we're just going to remove row subtotals. So if I expand this, I have a nice sort of pivot table chart or table here. I can also do something like adding the customer name as a slicer into this report. So we'll just change that to a slicer. So now I can see item sales by customer just by clicking through these. So very simple report to get Business Central data into Power BI. When trying to connect Power BI to Dynamics CE, so we would open up the Power BI desktop and get data like we normally would. And we're going to choose more. And we're going to choose Online Service and Dynamics 365 Online and hit Connect. It's now going to prompt us to enter our web API URL. There's a couple ways you can do this. Under Basics, so it's giving you what it wants and the API. How you would go about finding what this URL should be is if we connect to our Dynamics 365 environment. And we go to Advanced Settings or Settings tab. And we go to Customizations and go to Developer Resources. You'll see this is the service root URL here. So this is what we want to copy. So we'll copy that. We would now paste this into this box and hit OK at this point. This is going to now want to authenticate us to that environment. So we would select organizational account, and we can sign in with our credentials. So we're going to get prompted for our account, our email address, or Office 365 username and associated password. and we would hit connect. So at this point, it's connecting us to our environment, and it will return all the objects that we have access to. So here's my environment, and if you can see I have accounts and cases. If I was to type into this field here, or opportunities, as you can see, I have access to pretty much every object that's available to me. So contacts. So contacts is there. So I'm just going to choose accounts for right now, just to make it easy to work with. But I could choose multiple if I wanted to as well. So once we've selected accounts, as you can see, it's now returning all the fields that are available to us in the accounts listing. And I would normally do what I normally do, which is, transform the data at this point and select only the fields that I want. So I'm going to hit transform data. And it's now opened up Power Query for us. And I have all the fields available to me. So one of the downsides with this method is it's actually returning for certain lookup fields, it's returning the associated GUIDs to us instead of the label value. So an example of that would be, let's just choose a column. Choose our columns here. And deselect everything. We'll hit currency field, so transaction currency ID, transaction currency value. Hit OK. So as you can see, it's returned the GUID to us, and then obviously the associated stuff related to that currency. So I could go in and return the name of the currency name as an example here, an associated GUID, but I'm not going to do that in this case. I'm going to show you another way we can connect to dynamic CE data using a tool called XRM Toolbox, which is a free product. Another way to connect to Dynamics CE data is to use a tool called XRM Toolbox. So if you go to xrmtoolbox.com webpage, you'll notice there is explanation of what this tool is. It's basically a free tool with a bunch of tools that people have built into it to accommodate and facilitate the process of doing certain tasks within the CRM or Dynamics CE system. So from this website, I would just hit download the latest version. Once I've downloaded it, it's going to create a zip file. I then extract that zip file and I have this application. I've already launched the application, so I'm not going to do that right now. First thing we're going to want to do using the tool is it's going to bring you to the start page, is you're going to want to create a connection to your Dynamics CE environment or download a specific tool. So I'm just going to open the tool library here just to show you all the tools that are available in here. But there's a lot of tools, as you can see. There's stuff from bulk delete tool to data import tools, dashboard transfer tools, currency exchange rates automation, all sorts of things. So I'm not going to go over each one of these tools, but there's a large list of tools that the community has provided to us to use. Some of these are better than others. So the tool I'm going to focus on today is something called the Power Query tool. So I'm just going to jump back there. So I've actually installed, so you basically select the tool, click the install button up here to install that particular tool. I've actually already done that in this case, so I'm not going to do that here. So I have the Power Query tool. I'm just going to click on it just to show you what it looks like. So it's a tool that does a bunch of things, and I'll go over this shortly. But the first thing, as I mentioned, what you want to do is create a connection to your environment. So I would hit the connection or create a new connection. I've already created a connection in this case, but if I hit new connection, I get prompted with a wizard where I entered my organization URL, which I've already done in this case. That would be, and then provide a username, your username, and your associated password. So I've done that. I'm not going to go through that step again. Once I've created that connection, I would connect to environment, open the tool, and now I'm ready to use the tool. So the Power Query Builder tool is, first thing you want to do is click Load Entities. This will load all the associated entities within your environment. So in my case, I'm going to select Account. And now I'm also shown all the views that I've created, be it system views or quick find views that are available in the system. So in this case, I want all accounts. Now this view within the system is all accounts. I could easily create my own view. I could select certain fields. I could add a field. Like, for example, I want address 1, street 3. I could add that into the list as well here. Let's select it, click add, and now it's added into the field. So it's just a template or a base to go from. So next thing I want to do is select all the fields, and then I would go to fetch an XML query. When I do that, I first have to generate the fetch XML. So basically I'm creating XML code that I can use within the Power Query editor. One of the things you want to do though is you also need the service URLs. So once I've connected to environment, I would click generate service URLs. There are 2 service URLs that are required. One is the Dyn 365CE base URL. The other one is the service root URL. So what I would do is I'm going to open up a new Power BI desktop file here. And I would click Get Data and select a blank query. Once I've done that, I now need to paste in my base URL. So I'm just going to copy that, go back to Power BI, paste it in. I also need to rename this with the exact same name. So it would be Dyn 365 CE base URL. And I would do the same thing with the service root URL. So copy that whole thing. We're going to create another blank query again. And rename this service root URL. Once I've done those 2 things, I'm now ready to go back to our fetch XML query. So a query that we generated would be this. I'm basically just going to highlight this, Control C to copy it. Go back to Power Query Editor. We're going to create another new query again. Blank query again. And now instead of just pasting it in there, I'm just going to use the advanced query editor, delete this information that's already in there, and then paste it into here. So as you can see, I have no syntax errors. Everything looks fine. I will hit done. At this point, it may prompt us to enter credentials to connect to the data, which we would just sign in with our normal username and password. In this case, it's not prompting me, and it's created. My data is now loaded into query 1. I could rename this query just to make it, I won't do that though. So I have all my data loaded into the view here. I've also added a link, and the way I did that, I'm just going to jump back to the XML query, is when I am configuring the data source and updating the fetch XML query, which is under it's under the fetch XML config, and I would select add record URL, and by doing that, it's going to add back into our Power BI query here. It's going to add this link with our tenant and the account ID and the rest of the information. So then I would close and apply this. It's now going to build the model. And I'm ready to start building something. So as an example, I could drag account name into here. And I also want to go to the, if I was to drag just the link as an example into this table, typically it would not be recognized as a URL. So the way you would do that is you would select that field, go to the modeling tab, and make sure that this data category is set to web URL. And then it becomes a hyperlink that you can click on. So if I was to, I have a simple table here, but if I click on a particular record, it'll now open up that particular record within the D365 environment. So this is a nice way to create dashboards and have give your end users the ability to drill back on certain records or opportunities or cases within Dynamics CE or really any entity back into the source system. So webinar recap. We reviewed how to connect to D365 CE from Power BI. We also reviewed how to connect to Business Central from Power BI. And we also learned how to use the XRM Toolbox to connect to Dynamics 365 CE.